Now I'm gonna wipe down this mating surface here once again before we install our water pump. So now we're gonna start putting the water pump bolts back on. All right, so we got all the water pump bolts started, so I'm gonna use this mirror to check all of them and make sure that we got all the bolts started. Okay, so we're gonna use this electric ratchet to snug them up a little bit, and then we're gonna torque them down. We're gonna torque all these water pump bolts. So now we're gonna torque the bolt for the water pump. The torque spec for these 10mm water pump bolts is 8.7 foot-pounds. So I'm gonna use an inch-pound torque wrench. So we're gonna convert 8.7 foot-pound into each pound. So 8.7 foot-pounds into inch pounds equals 105 inch-pounds. So I'm gonna adjust my torque wrench here. We're gonna set it up to 105 inch-pound. So now we're gonna torque these bolts here. I hope you can hear the torque wrench click. So this one is tight already. Alright, so the 10mm bolts on the water pump have been torqued down, so we're good. So now the next step is going to be installing the idler pulley. We're going to install the timing belt idler pulley. So we're going to apply a little bit of thread lock on these threads over here. Just a little bit. Now here is our new idler pulley. So now we're gonna install it right there, just like that. Now we're gonna torque down the bolt for this idler pulley. The torque spec for this idler pulley bolt is 33 foot-pounds. All right, so we're gonna torque this bolt down 33 foot-pounds. So right there. I hope you heard the torque wrench click. All right, so that's good. Our idler pulley bolt has been torqued down to 33 foot-pounds. Now we're gonna spin it. As you can see, it's spinning nicely and smoothly. So everything looks good. So now the next step is gonna be installing our timing belt tensioner. Now, the torque spec for the timing belt tensioner bolt is 8.7 foot-pounds, okay? So it's the same spec as the water pump bolt. So 8.7 foot-pounds. We're gonna use our inch-pound torque wrench. So we're gonna convert that into inch-pounds, so that's going to give us about 105 inch-pounds of torque. So we're gonna torque these two bolts over here up to 105 inch-pounds. So now let's install our tensioner here. Now, as you guys saw, this tensioner here has a little grenade pin. We're not gonna remove this pin quite yet. We're gonna leave that pin on. We're gonna remove it when we put everything back together, when we have the adjuster for the tensioner on and the timing belt. Once everything is on, that's when we're gonna remove this pin. Okay, so now let's torque the bolt for the timing belt tensioner. I don't know if you can hear the torque wrench, but my torque wrench just clicked. So right there. All right, so we torqued down the bolt of the timing belt tensioner, so we're good to go. Now the next step is going to be bringing back these camshaft sprockets to where they're supposed to be. We're going to make sure that our timing marks are lined up. Okay, we're going to double check all the marks. I don't think our crankshaft gear moved, so our crankshaft gear should be right in time. We're going to make sure that we bring these back. Remember, these were off. We're gonna line up all these marks, and then we're gonna install our timing belt. After we install the timing belt, the next step is gonna be installing the timing belt tensioner adjuster. Okay, and after that we're gonna keep going. So now let's move this cam sprocket over here. Let's make sure we get all these timing marks lined up. All right, so this cam shaft over here is really off, so we're gonna bring that back. This one really moved a lot. All right, so that one is on. We're gonna double check this one. Okay, this one here is on. So now our timing marks are all lined up. I'm gonna show you how they're all lined up now before we install our timing belt. So let's double check all our timing marks before we install our timing belt. So let's start with the camshaft over here. So you see our timing mark over here is lined up. Okay, so this mark is lined up with this. Okay, so as you can see, our timing marks are lined up, so we're good to go. Right there, guys. Okay, so the front cam is good. So now let's check the back cam. Okay, so I'm sorry because this side is really tight. It's hard for me to show you. So right here. Okay, so this side is also lined up. So look at this mark here and look at this tooth. Okay, it's lined up with this mark over here. Okay, so it's because the camera is kind of at an angle, so I double checked these marks. They are all lined up. Okay, so that's good. All right, so now let's go down to the crankshaft and double check our timing mark at the crankshaft gear. So we are down here. As you can see, our timing marks on the crankshaft gear are also lined up. Okay, so that's good. So now we can install our timing belt. So here comes our timing belt. We're gonna install the belt. Now, when we install the belt, we have to make sure that the slack on the belt is gonna be on the tensioner side. So we have to make sure that the belt on this side is gonna be tight and all the slack should be on the tensioner side. Okay, so now let's install our new timing belt. All right, so here comes our timing belt. All right, so we got this timing belt on. What I like about this engine design is when you are installing the timing belt, around the camshaft sprocket, there are some bosses here. You see this boss over here, and there's another one here. So once you get everything lined up, it holds the belt in place for you. As you can see, I'm not holding the belt. So this boss over here, there's one here and there's another one over here, and there's also one more down on the crankshaft pulley. So it holds, the crankshaft gear, it holds the timing belt on for you. Okay, so as you can see, we don't have any slack over here. Okay, our slack is on the tensioner side. So now we're gonna install the tensioner adjuster. Now all our marks are lined up, nothing moved. Okay, nothing moved, all the marks are lined up, so we're good. So now let's install the tensioner adjuster. All right, so here is our new timing tensioner adjuster. Okay, we're gonna get it out of the bag. Now we're gonna use a sleeve that's on the old one, this sleeve over here. We're gonna remove that and we're gonna install it on the new one. Actually, let me wipe it down. So I'm gonna apply a tiny layer of anti-seize compound on this sleeve before I install it on the new tensioner adjuster. I applied a thin layer of anti-seize compound on this sleeve. So this sleeve goes in on the back side of the adjuster. Okay, just like that. And then the bolt is gonna come up front this way. So now we're gonna install it. It's gonna go down over here. All right, I'm gonna use my mirror to check down there and make sure everything looks good. We're gonna make sure that our adjuster is sitting well. Okay, everything seems to be lined up. So we're gonna tighten the bolt for the timing belt tensioner adjuster. The torque spec for this tensioner adjuster bolt is 33 foot-pound. So we're gonna torque this. We're gonna torque this up to 33 foot-pound. So right there, I hope you can hear the torque wrench click. All right, so that's torqued down. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna remove this grenade pin that's holding the tensioner plunger down. So our timing belt is routed properly. Everything looks good. All the bolts are torqued down over here. So now I'm gonna remove this grenade pin. So right here, I pulled out this little grenade pin over here. So as you can see, this looks a lot better, okay? The timing belt is tight on every side, okay? We don't have a lot of slack like we had previously. Like right now, I won't be able to remove this belt. Like there's no way I can slide this belt out, okay? So now let's double check our timing marks. Let's make sure that the timing marks did not move. After double checking the timing marks, we're gonna turn the engine twice. We're gonna make 2 complete revolutions. After we make 2 complete revolutions, all these marks over here should be lined up. If all the marks fall dead on, then we will be good to go. At that point, we're just gonna start putting everything back together, okay? So now let's check the marks first, and then we're gonna turn the engine. So let's check the timing mark on this side first. So right here, this mark is lined up with this one over here, okay? So the front camshaft is good. So now let's check the back one. So we are here at the back. This one is also lined up over here. I mean, the camera is a little bit of at an angle, okay? But our mark is definitely lined up, okay? It's right there on the tooth where the mark is. So the back cam is good also. So now let's go to the crankshaft gear. As you can see, our timing mark is dead on. So right there, it's lined up. Look at those 2 white marks over there. They're both lined up, okay? So now let's turn the engine and make sure that everything is good. When we turn the engine twice, these marks should line up again. So now let's turn the engine. So that's 1 full revolution of the crankshaft. So we're gonna go another revolution. We have turned the engine twice, so 2 full revolutions of the crankshaft, 1 full revolution of the camshaft. So now let's double check our timing marks. Alright, we're gonna double check our timing marks. So let's double check the front cam. So as you can see, our mark on the front cam sprocket is right there, dead on. Okay, so our mark is lined up. Now let's check the back cam. So right there, the back cam is also dead on. Check that out. Okay, this mark over here is lined up. Okay, the back cam looks good. So now let's go down to the crankshaft gear. So everything is dead on the camshaft sprocket. Now check out the crankshaft gear. So down here we're also dead on. Okay, our timing marks are lined up, so we're good to go. We have set the timing, everything looks good, we're good to go. Now let's go back under the hood and install the motor mount bracket. So the motor mount bracket has 3 bolts, these 3 bolts over here. Okay, we're gonna install these bolts and we're gonna torque them down. The torque spec for the motor mount bracket bolt is 33 foot-pound. Okay, and these bolts over here go through the water pump, so we have to make sure we torque them down. Alright, so now we're gonna torque those bolts. So the torque spec for these bolts is 33 foot-pound. So let's torque them down. Alright, so we have torqued all the motor mount bracket bolts. So now the next step is going to be installing this little 10mm bolt over here that was missing. I'm going to find a bolt here that we can put there. Alright, so we're going to put a bolt over here. Although there wasn't a bolt there, it was missing, but we're going to put one there. Alright, so that's good. So now what's next, guys? Now the next step is going to be installing the motor mount. So I have tightened the motor mount bolt. So now I'm gonna install this little bracket that sits on the motor mount. So I'm gonna install this bracket over here. I don't know if you guys can see, but this here is really tight and I can't really show you guys what I'm doing. Alright, so we got everything coming back together slowly and surely. So now we're gonna install this bracket over here. All right, everything is coming back together slowly and surely. So I did reinstall our motor mount. I hope you can see that bolt down there. Okay, so that's one of the motor mount bolt. Okay, everything is back together. There is our motor mount. Okay, so everything is reinstalled. All right, so now let's lift up the vehicle so we can install the lower timing cover. So now we're gonna install our bottom timing cover. Before we install our bottom timing belt cover, we're gonna remove this crankshaft bolt first. Now, before we install our timing cover, do you remember what we have to install first? We have to install the timing cover. No, I'm just kidding. We have to install this washer first. I'm just checking if you guys are paying attention. So this goes on first, and then we have to make sure that the gasket for the timing cover is still in place. Okay, the gasket is there. So now we're gonna install our timing cover. Okay, so just like that. Now we're gonna start installing the bolt. Alright, so we got all the bolts for the bottom timing cover tightened. So now the next step is going to be installing the crankshaft pulley. So we're going to install our crankshaft pulley. Just like that. We're going to install the bolt. So now we're going to torque down the crankshaft pulley bolt. We're gonna use this tool over here to hold the crankshaft pulley, and then we're gonna use our torque wrench to torque the crankshaft pulley bolt. The torque spec for the crankshaft pulley bolt is 47 foot-pound plus an additional 60 degrees. So we're gonna torque it down to 47 foot-pound first. So I'm going to try to hold this pry bar over here. So right there, we tightened the crankshaft pulley bolt up to 47 foot-pound. I hope you can hear the torque wrench click. So now I'm gonna adjust it. We're gonna go another 60 degrees. So we're gonna go an additional 60 degrees. So our crankshaft pulley bolt is torqued down. So now I'm gonna lower the vehicle. We're gonna fill up the cooling system with coolant, and after that we're gonna start the engine just to verify our repair, and then we're gonna put everything else back together. So we're gonna start the engine and verify our repair first before we install our upper timing covers. So let's make sure nothing is in the way. All right, so now I'm gonna start the engine. All right, guys, so as you can see, the engine is running. Everything looks good. Okay, so our engine is timed properly. It started on one kick. The engine sounds good. So I'm gonna go back inside the vehicle and turn off the engine. And then we're gonna put the rest of the stuff back on. Alright guys, as you guys heard, the engine sounds good. We're good to go. So now let's put the upper timing covers back on. So now I'm gonna install the back timing cover first. The back timing cover has this little channel over here where the electrical harness goes into. So we're gonna install this first. So just like that. Now we're gonna start putting the bolts back on. Alright, so we got the back cover installed. So now I'm gonna install the front cover, and then we're gonna tighten all the bolts at the same time. Alright, so I tightened all the bolts for the upper timing covers. So we are good to go. We are making progress. So I'm gonna reroute this harness over here, and then I'm gonna reinstall this. I'm gonna make sure I reinstall this little 10mm bolt that I removed for this bracket. So now what's the next step? The next step is going to be reinstalling the power steering pump. So here comes our power steering pump. Right there. There it is. So the first bolt is going to go right here. And then the second bolt is going to go down over here. So we got the bolt for the power steering pump tightened. So now let's raise up the vehicle so we can install our serpentine belt tensioner. Before we raise up the vehicle and install our serpentine belt tensioner, I wanted to show you the timing belt routing. So this is how the timing belt is routed, in case you had a question about it. Okay, so this is my service info. This over here is our water pump. This is the tensioner adjuster pulley, and this over here is the idler pulley. Okay, so this is how our timing belt is routed. So now let's go back to the vehicle. So we're gonna install our serpentine belt tensioner. So we have to make sure that the big bolt has started first, and then we're gonna install the small bolt over here for this little strut. All right, so that's tightened. So now we're gonna tighten the 17mm bolt up here. So that's tightened also. Okay, so now the next step is gonna be installing our serpentine belt. All right, so now we're gonna install our serpentine belt. I'm gonna feed it down here first. And after that, I'm gonna go through the AC compressor. So now I'm gonna get my ratchet on the serpentine belt tensioner, so I can push it back. So just like that. Our serpentine belt is installed. We're gonna make sure it's routed properly. Everything looks good. So while we are up here, we're gonna reinstall our power steering reservoir. So our power steering reservoir has a hose that goes to the power steering pump. So we're gonna reconnect that. So here comes our power steering reservoir. All right, so now we're gonna install our clamp. All right, so the reservoir is back in place. Now we're gonna bring our coolant surge tank back here. Okay, everything is coming back together slowly and surely. So now this AC line is gonna go right here. All right, so we're good to go up here. So now let's raise up the vehicle one last time. We're gonna double check everything on the bottom. We're gonna make sure that our serpentine belt is sitting well around the crankshaft pulley and the AC compressor. And after that, we're gonna reinstall the fender liner, and then we're gonna put the tire back on. So now let's raise up the vehicle. So here is what we have down here. So we're making sure that our serpentine belt is routed properly. Okay, as you can see, everything looks good. Okay, so our serpentine belt is routed properly. Okay, and the belt is sitting on the pulley grooves, so we're good. So now let's install our fender liner. All right, so now we can reinstall our fender liner. Alright, so we got the fender liner secured. So now let's reinstall the tire. So now I'm going to torque the lug nuts. The torque spec for the lug nuts is 95 foot-pounds. So we're going to torque this. Alright, so we torqued all the lug nuts up to 95 foot-pounds. So now I'm gonna bring you guys under the hood so we can install the engine cover. We got everything back together, so let's double check and make sure everything looks good before we install the engine cover. So up here everything looks good. We're good back there. We're good up front here. So everything looks good. So now let's install the engine cover, and then we're gonna start the engine. Alright, so the engine cover is reinstalled. So now I'm gonna go inside the vehicle and start the engine. Alright guys, so as you can hear, the engine is running. The engine sounds good. So we're good to go. There's no more noise. Remember the noise we heard before we replaced the timing belt? There was a growling noise coming from under the hood. But now the noise is no longer there, okay? So this is fixed. I'm happy about how this engine sounds. I'm going to drive the vehicle outside the shop so I can move on to the next vehicle, okay? I won't take you guys with me on a test drive. I will test drive this tomorrow. I have other vehicles out there that I have to look at. So now I'm gonna turn off the engine so we can wrap up this video. Alright guys, so I'm gonna leave it right over here. This is how you remove and replace a timing belt and the water pump on a 2011 Honda Pilot with a 3.5 liter. It's basically the same process on a lot of the 3.5 liter Honda engines, like a Odyssey, a Ridgeline, and a Honda Pilot. They basically have the same engine, and you can use this process to replace the timing belt. I hope you liked the video. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like the video, give it a thumb down. But if you do, you gotta tell me why so we can make better videos in the future. If this is your first time here, subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell so you can get notified every time I upload a new video. If you have any comments, questions, criticism, leave them in the comment box. Thanks for watching. See you next time.